Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Welcome to another episode of the Big Daddy Liberty Show. It is a Wednesday evening. You know what that means? It means the BDL Show is on your screens. I do think I'm having serious network issues tonight, and I'm hoping that won't affect the overall quality of the show. And I'm actually rather concerned at that, to be honest. And sorry, just give me a moment, everybody. Let me just try and troubleshoot as much as I possibly can, at these very early moments. With that being said, welcome to the show. How have you guys been? Can someone confirm if the live chat is working? As I said, it is really a weird evening. Maybe the whole system is run by commies today. I don't know what's going on. But okay, there we go. I can see the live stream. It's now sort of come on. G Falcon, Tinas, Manpatria, I can see, is on. Funny enough, he is going to be a guest a little later on the show. Tim Rowlands, I see you. Welcome to the show, guys. I see that the live stream is clearly up and running. Okay, great. I'm a happy chappy. With that being said, once again, Molo Sanbonani, welcome, how's it, shalom, to the BDL show. Guys, it's going to be a jam-packed show. As I mentioned, I think yesterday, I did take to the streets to basically bring you some interviews of street traders in particular, because in this episode, we're going to make the case for, and the argument really, that the South African government, as it is led by the African National Congress, is vehemently against job creation, number one. And number two, it actually has job creators, entrepreneurs, and those with jobs firmly in their crosshairs in terms of being on the assault against those individuals. Now, that might sound like a very inflammatory thing to say, and you're probably thinking, BDL, how could you say that? But well, I'm going to justify that statement tonight by giving you not only the hard numbers, but also bringing you, as I said, interviews, conversations with people out in the real world who are entrepreneurs and can tell you firsthand that not only are they not getting any support from the government, many of them are not even looking for that support, but what they are getting from the government is an antagonistic and really even a warlike disposition from the state. So we're going to have that conversation tonight as I bring you that special feature, which I'll play just now. Sorry, I'm desperately searching through my notes here. When you have a poor sort of network connection, it makes you so nervous. You sort of have to run through your checklist of everything for a show. All right, now that I've got that out the way and my nerve is back, again, welcome to the show, guys. And a reminder, if you want to support the Big Daddy Liberty Show, it's actually very easy. Go on over to Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can support the show. That's about 16, 17 Rand a month. Buy me a beer, so to speak. And you can support the show. I will, as I mentioned in the previous BDL show, I will expand the ways in which people can support the show. I know a lot of you have been saying, hey, BDL, Patreon is a bit tricky, it's a bit weird, we're not used to it. So I will assist in that regard and expand the ways in which we can do that, including for you guys in the cryptocurrency community. Guys, I'm as I said, and I must apologize in advance, I'm a little worried about the quality of the line, so I hope it doesn't affect the show too terribly. And with that being said, let me actually hop straight into it. So this week, I took the moment to basically speak to street traders and organizations that have been in the fight against the government and the creeping hand of the state that has basically sought to destroy the South African economy for the benefits of a political elite in this country who are drunk on socialist ideology. Now, I say this, and a lot of you who've been paying attention on the show will know exactly what I'm talking about. The ANC, the party that runs the South African government, quite literally is governed by a socialist policy called the National Democratic Revolution. This socialist document, and I've gone into detail a little bit before in previous shows, is that they've recommitted themselves to this ideology and this doctrine at every single elective conference. And yes, even your so-called capitalist Cyril Ramaphosa, the current ANC president and the president of the country, has committed himself to advancing the National Democratic Revolution, which simply posits that there should be if you look at Marxist theory, it posits that there should be a vanguard of the poor, a vanguard of the revolution, who sit at the top of society, a small gaggle, if you will, of political elites that are supposedly from the proletariat, which is super funny to me because I don't see how Ramaphosa is from the proletariat, being a multi-billionaire. But again, those internal contradictions aside, but essentially the ideology behind it says this, that there should be a small elite, a political elite, seemingly chosen from the proletariat, as Marx argued in the Communist Manifesto, and that elite, that vanguard of the proletariat or vanguard of the poor, then controls the levers of the state. It controls everything and anything, in the state. That is why you hear the ANC, much like the EFF, advocate for things like expropriation without compensation. In other words, government having the power to confiscate something from you and not compensate you, for it. That's why you'll hear ANC politicians often wax lyrical about nationalizing the commanding heights of the economy. Simply put, politicians wanting to give themselves power to basically take control of what should be and is private enterprises and taking them into the control of the state. In other words, politicians controlling industries, etc., etc. You'll hear politicians saying, oh, the state or government needs to be involved in more aspects of society. That's why you'll hear the ANC talk about wanting to implement the national health insurance. All of these things, all of these policy proposals, these asinine policy proposals you'll hear from the ANC have their root, find their genesis in the National Democratic Revolution doctrine. Now, I say this and I go into meticulous detail in trying to show you the links and, and almost putting the thread between all the loopholes, or the loops rather, so that you understand that, the things that are happening in South Africa aren't just random acts of like a few idiots who are at the top. No, it's driven purposefully by ideological leftists. Now, I say this and immediately in my comment sections and in my inboxes, I'm flooded by, the lefty types, the ones who still believe in red and tooth and claw theories like communism and socialism. And, there's one idiot who I've been berated by in my inbox. Again, I can tell that this is one of those young chaps who's still deeply immersed in what he's taught at university and hasn't quite learned yet to think for himself. So he thinks he's being very intellectual by regurgitating the same nonsense that he's essentially taught. And yes, predictably, those types then come into my inbox and say, oh yeah, you're misrepresenting socialism, you're misrepresenting communism. The ANC and the EFF and all these policies are not real socialism, they'll say. Real socialism, they'll argue, is places like Denmark and, Sweden and, all of these democratic socialist places. That's all absolute nonsense. It's all absolute nonsense. And again, don't take it from me. The Prime Minister of Denmark, I don't know if he's the former Prime Minister, I haven't caught up on their politics. I forgot his first name now. I think it was Lars Rasmussen. When he did a speaking tour, when he went to the United States of America, I think he was at Harvard University, and in his speech, he basically he burst the myth. He immediately burst the myth, which at the time was very popular. It was being pushed popularly by the likes of Bernie Sanders and the likes of Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, that somehow these Scandinavian countries are socialist, in particular democratic socialism. The Prime Minister of Denmark himself burst that bubble real quick and said, no, actually, Denmark is not a socialist country. Denmark is a market economy. It is a free, very free, actually, market economy. And it is from the proceeds of that market economy that we're able as a government to tax and essentially spend on welfare programs in that society. And that cuts across as a definition of nearly all Scandinavian countries. And ironically, South Africa, for a while, was a bit like a Scandinavian country in terms of how it approached monetary policy and how it approached economic policy, insofar as there was a period under the Mpiyakhe years. There was a period under the Mpiyakhe years, former President Thabo Mbeki, where the government basically said, hey, we're heavily indebted as the ANC government at that point. And instead of us rolling out, the initial policy of the RDP, the Reconstruction and Development Program, and there's a very good book on that if you want to understand the RDP, what was initially an economic policy. Today, when we talk about RDP, people think it's just houses. No, it isn't. It was a whole economic strategy by the aim they ran with in the 1994 election. If you want to read about that, there is a book by Mandela himself, I think he penned it, called RDP. You're welcome to go back and read that so you can understand, the socialist underpinnings of the ANC. Anyway, Mbeki then comes into power and basically says, the whole socialism stuff, no, screw that. We're not interested in that nonsense. What we want is to allow the private sector to grow, allow the private sector to do what it does. And then we as the government will essentially, enjoy wonderful tax revenues to then spend on social programs. And did it work? Yeah. For a while, it really did. Insofar as, the South African economy was growing, it boomed under the Mbeki years. We saw year-on-year growth. We saw 5% year-on-year growth, which we can only envy today, being an economy that's now receding, that's in recession. We saw, not only that, we saw the South African government, registering budget surpluses, under Trevor Manuel as the finance minister. And for a while, the government was then able to finance and fund. I can see my line is very choppy. Sorry, I just had to pause there, guys, because I'm not sure if the line is holding out. And I think the comment section will eventually tell me if it's coming through properly. Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the comments, so I'll continue. And we saw, as I was going into a bit more detail, that, under the Mbeki years for a while, because of the economic policy he embarked on, which basically allowed the private sector to grow, allowed the private sector to basically do what it does best, which is to generate jobs. What did the numbers tell us at the time? The ANC in that period was able to add, basically create or bring, yeah, I'm right. It was able to add 10 million jobs into, and 10 million people into employment. Excuse me. That's what it was. It was a boom time, for every one RDP house that was built, one state house that was built, the country was building 10 formal houses at that time. It was actually a time where there was a little bit of optimism economically in this country. For whatever you think of social welfare, the ANC government was able to expand social welfare in this country, to include more people on the old age pension grant, for example, to include more people on the disability grant, off of not borrowed money. They weren't borrowing that money, but rather from the money they were generating, revenue from the economy. And that's what happened, basically. It was able to expand that program because it was basically getting the money from taxes. So for a short window of time, if I can call it that, we actually saw a Scandinavian-esque, not in a full sense, but a Scandinavian-esque type economy where politicians allowed the market to grow, to roar to life, to create the jobs, to create the revenue, and that the state was then able to tax quite generously for itself to then run these social welfare programs Again, I'm not prosecuting the actual need or importance or veracity of the social welfare programs themselves. That's not the discussion here. I'm just making the point based on the record of history, what we saw under that period. And if you look at a lot of the polling that was done by the Institute of Race Relations in terms of people's sentiments at that time, were South Africans positive about the future at that point? Yeah, it reflected in the polling. So that whatever your gripes with the ANC was at that time, generally speaking, South Africans felt like, you know what, we're kind of heading in the right direction. I even feel a little bit optimistic that I might find a job, etc., etc. And then came the Jacob Zuma years and his friends in the SACP, the Communist Party, and COSATU, the trade union. Sorry, I looked around like that because I just heard the gate bell ring, and I don't know who's coming at 8:20 to my place, so it's probably not for me. But anyway, guys, I'm taking a bit of a long way round to basically make the point that there was only a brief window in time in this country where the ANC actually shut down rather, and it relegated to the corner the leftist socialist communist ideology that historically and still does drive the ANC. And that's why Mbeki was deeply unpopular with the South African Communist Party. That's why Mbeki was deeply unpopular with the trade union movement at this in this country, COSATU in particular, which was yoked to the ANC. There are hard reasons for that. And the reasons were, he literally said, enough with the socialism. For a change, allow the market to generate the very money that you need to grow the economy and to fund the social welfare. But that all came crashing down, and we're seeing the effects of it today, where now the ANC has gone back to its original form, if I can call it that, and is now fully embracing the socialist ideology, is fully embracing the communist diktats, has fully recommitted itself again in action, not just words, to the national democratic revolution. And we're seeing that now in hard numbers that are coming out in this country, in an unemployment rate, excuse me, in an unemployment rate that has screamed up to 30.1%. Crazy numbers like that. We're seeing that on an everyday basis, people who have even given up trying to find work in the formal economy and are doing things in the informal economy, being street traders, hustlers, as we used to call them back in my township. It's even going after those people on some, how dare you try and create a bit of income for yourself? How dare you try and create some savings for your family? Street traders and in the business, like SMME owners, basically, entrepreneurs in this country, are under constant attack by the state, both in terms of the regulatory burden that is placed on them, and if you're a street trader in particular, in terms of the physical embodiment of a police officer, whether SAPS or a municipal one, who will come and confiscate your stuff, trash your business, all under this guise of, oh no, how dare you trade without permission from the government. And we're doing this, specifically the ANC government is doing this with the backdrop of a 30.1% unemployment rate. And that's the official figure, because if you then take the figure that includes people who are discouraged work seekers, in other words, people say, stuff it, I'm not even going to try, look for work, then the real unemployment rate in this country is nearly 40%. It's 39.7%, if I recall the number. Guys, 40% of South Africans of working age unemployed. And the ANC doesn't bat an eyelid. Like, this isn't the biggest issue that they fight. If anything, if you look at what they do on social media, they throw out some sort of racial issue on some, here you go, focus on this racist. Look at what Helen Zille said. Oh, what a racist. Lose your minds over that. At the same time, the unemployment numbers are coming out. Lesufi, the education MEC here in Gauteng, race-baiting douchebag, throws out a tweet and says, oh, man, how can we still have an Orania in 2020? Oh, how dare those Afrikaners create their own little community and seek self-determination. How dare they? Don't they know that, we don't want that as that's all irrelevant. That's all irrelevant. To the daily lived experience of a poor South African, no one is going, Orania is the biggest issue I'm facing. No one is saying that when at home people are starving. They can't even put bread on the table. But what are the politicians fixated on? Orania. A community of 1,700, nearly 2,000 people in the middle of the Northern Cape, minding their own business, living their own lives. Those are the people I need to worry about if I was a poor black South African in Alexandria. Those are the people I need to worry about if I was a poor colored individual somewhere in the Western Cape. Again, it emphasizes that the ANC does not give a flying F about poor South Africans. Not only that, it's made it its mission to ensure that the number of poor South Africans is one which is growing consistently. Consistently. How can you say that, Big Daddy? You don't have evidence of that. Well, let me be precise and specific. In vlog 36, the previous vlog I did, I compared the unemployment number of quarter one in 2010. In other words, 10 years ago, same period. And the unemployment rate at that point, there were 4.6 unemployed people in South Africa. And that number had grown, it had mushroomed, comparing it to the same period now in 2020 to 7.4 million people who are now unemployed. And do you mean to tell me that the ANC government cares about defeating unemployment and creating jobs? Really? There is something profoundly wrong about basically supporting politicians who continue to destroy the quality of life, to destroy the opportunities, if you will, for individuals. There is something profoundly wrong, with supporting politicians who have made it their mission to destroy the individual in favor of them as politicians holding on to power. There is something fundamentally wrong with continuing to support politicians, whether they're in the ANC, the EFF, the DA, it doesn't matter. Hashtag politicians are trash. There is something fundamentally wrong about continuing to support those people when they have no care and no regard in real terms for families, for South African families. And then somehow I'm the weird one for pointing this out. I'm the weird one, according to the left, broadly in this country, for pointing this out. The race-obsessed left, the ones who, I like to call the blavity blacks on the one hand, the people who weaponize being black and argue that they're continuously victims because of that. Hashtag blavity blacks. And the social justice whites, the social justice warrior whites, the ones who are self-flagellating. Oh, look at how in the past whites did this and did that. Therefore, today I need to flagellate myself and bend the knee and shine the shoes of black people. All these condescending things that we're seeing not only happen in America, but also here in South Africa. Guys, I keep saying this, and I woke up to the segment now because I really had to do this rant. I keep saying this. Ideas matter. Ideas matter. If you really want to change South Africa, then you've got to be involved in the battle of ideas. Understanding that it is a society at the point of a crisis like ours right now, where individuals who inject the greatest volume of ideas into that society, they will be the ones who win the day by swaying society one way or the other. And the race-obsessed left in this country broadly, whether they are center-left statists or they are communist or they're socialists, those individuals have the upper ground at the moment, or the upper ground. Higher ground is the expression I was looking for. They have the higher ground. And you cannot defeat their ideas by thinking you can just be a keyboard warrior. Every now and then complaining about what's happening around you. You've got to get involved. And you've got to support those of us who are literally devoting our lives to the battle of ideas, of growing a culture, growing a society that values liberty as the most important political value in society. supporting those of us who have clearly, at least I think I've clearly, articulated a vision for a society which is property owning, prosperous, free, and non-racial. How do you do that? By literally engaging fellow South Africans and saying, hey, forget the politicians for a moment. What are the ideas that actually improve your quality of life? How do we go, if you will, door to door, house to house, community to community, to convince fellow South Africans, regardless of their race, that these are the ideas that build a nation, that build an economy? Man, you guys are not hearing me. Y'all are not hearing me. There is a big battle that we have ahead of us. And I'm putting it to you that we can actually do something about it. I'm doing something about it. I've put my hand up and I've said, you know what? I fight for my country because I love South Africans. I love South African families. That's why I do what I do. So that when I start hitting the road, when I start hitting the road next week, basically beginning my trip from Johannesburg and ending up in Cape Town at least, I'm going to take about a week and a half to do that. And I'm going to hit dorpies along the way. Various dorpies and towns and cities along the way. To do what, you're wondering? Small little campaigns, bringing awareness. In some cases, I'll be going door to door with material, engaging people in the battle of ideas, selling my ideas, advocating for my ideas with ordinary South Africans, and saying, hey, if you like these ideas, then expect to hear me on a local radio station in your part of the world, if they'll syndicate my show. If you like these ideas, follow the BDL bus. If you like these ideas, form a little group in your own area where you guys can continue this conversation. As I said, guys, the groundwork is very difficult. You don't win this with catchy phrases and overnight appearances on MSM. No, you've got to appear in people's homes. That sounded weird. It sounded very creepy. Like I'll be standing in some corner at your home like, hey, sir, have you heard of... No, but what I mean is, you've got to shake hands and you've got to meet people and say, hey, this is what it means to be a classical liberal. These are the ideas a classical liberal holds. It empowers you, the individual. And really, we talk a lot about the individual. Really, we're a family society. So it empowers you, the individuals in a family. The family becomes the most important area of organizing society, not the politicians, not the self-appointed arbiters of what is good or bad in society, but the family, the individual. And then you sell the sort of policies that support that, so that people get the ideas first, and then from there, they stand together and say, how do we pick the politicians who then advance this cause? As I've said before, and I'm gonna roll. So I'm gonna make this point. As I've said before, what's the mission, BDL? The mission is to create a society where the ideas sway people at a ground level, to put in place a culture, a political culture that makes it politically profitable for a politician, that makes it politically profitable for even a bad politician to make the right choices. That's what you want. So that people ask me, oh, but would you vote for this guy or would you vote for that guy? It's irrelevant. What you really want is creating a political climate that makes it politically profitable for a bad politician to make the right decisions. That's what you want. A liberty-leaning society does that really well. And that's my mission. That's why I will be living on the road literally for the next 6 months initially. House to house, community to community, door to door. If I'm in your dorpie, you might see me at a major intersection in your little town, wherever that may be, holding up a sign with an idea. And as people come up to argue with me maybe, or debate with me, or to agree with me, to then have an opportunity to actually talk to people, sway people on the ideas. And I'll bring you that content here on the BDL Show. You might find me in your neighborhood and I might say, hey, organize a small event. Invite your neighbors, invite your friends. It could be a small braai, if anything. And you can give me an opportunity to engage people that maybe you disagree with a lot. But give me a chance to come in front of people, talk to people, engage people on the ideas. and grow a community of people who say, yeah, we get it. We get it. That's the mission, guys. That's the groundwork. And I saw the comment saying, go past Orania. Absolutely, by the way. I do know a couple of people in Orania. And you can best believe that on my trip down to Cape Town, I will pass places like Orania. Excuse me. I know Daar is on my list of places to pass. I'm still working on the finer details because it's going to be a bit of a zigzag trip down to Cape Town. But a lot of this particular trip will be places like places and towns in the Northwest, places and towns in parts of the Free State a little bit, places in town in the Northern Cape. As I work my way, as I said, down to Cape Town. Guys, this is it. This is it. Oh, I'm feeling it now. It's building. Guys, I keep saying this. This is it. This is the ground war. This is what I'm devoting my life to. Bringing up the ideas that actually serve South Africans. Y'all are not hearing me tonight. I'm going to raise the volume just for y'all. This is the ground war. Actually reaching out to South African communities, going into neighborhoods where these ideas have never been before. You will see the Big Daddy Liberty truck in a township. You will see the Big Daddy Liberty truck in an informal settlement. You will see the Big Daddy Liberty truck in leafy suburbia. Why? Because I'm reaching out to South African families and advocating for the ideas of liberty. This is our moment. This is how you push back. This is how you fight back. And I can assure you now, I will not be alone. I will not be alone in this. As I continuously build this coalition of South Africans, there will be more voices in this country who say, actually, you know what? We want the liberty that we talk about. Man, oh man, oh man, oh man. Guys, I'm keeping an eye on the comments. I'm really sorry if it's buffering. I don't think I can do anything about it. And yes, Brazo, it's going to be a red pill, my sir. That is what's going to be happening on in this trip. So yeah, guys, let me get back to the show. But yeah, guys, as I said, maybe as a recap, a very quick recap before we get into the show, I will now, it's started. It has started. And you are very much part of it. I've said this for quite a while now, that those of you who are getting on the Liberty bus, muchos gracias. Ngiyabonga kakhulu, Bayronki, for the ondersteuning. Because this is now our moment where we begin to do something about it. No more blah, blah, blah. You will see BDL in your part of the world. And when I'm there, I'll announce it. I will make sure that people know. And that small group of people with an idea can rally around me and we say, okay, guys, what's the campaign? What are we doing? Are we going door to door in your neighborhood? Are we doing some small event that brings people to a point where we can talk? I can do a small talk and then a Q&A. What are we doing to advance these ideas in your neighborhood so that we can lay the seed? Woo! Hey, man, y'all fired me up tonight. Let's believe that. Don't even have the heater on. And that's how warm it is already. Woo! All right, guys. Oh, wow. Yo, guys, what's going on in the super chats here? Thank you so much. Who is this? This is Gwebes Baker, Badonki, man. 1,000 Rand support, dude. Thank you so much. That is crazy. Thank you so much, guys. Super appreciate that. Kyle Green, thank you very much, homie. Kyle basically saying you're a breath of fresh air, Big Daddy. Thanks, man. And yes, that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. For the love of Mzansi, it's greatness only. That's the standard. For the love of South Africa, it's greatness only. Nothing lower than that. Because I've told you before, and I will get into the show just now, but like I'm in that zone, guys. I've told you before, this country is a fantastic country. We truly are a great country. But if we're going to make it greater, then we need to be able to say, guys, families first, individuals first. You need to push the ideas that advance that. The idea that the individual, the family is more important than government. The family is more important than politicians. The family is more important than the blavity black types and the social justice warrior types who hate the idea of faith, flag, family, and freedom. They hate those ideas. And those are the people who I stand firmly against. Those are the people who will know me on this trip. There will be a buzz of people saying, why is this guy going around spreading these values that we fight against? Why is he doing this? Do you know why he's doing that? For the love of country? Because I've said it before, South Africa is not a natural country. It was put together by people, initially by colonial forces, stitched together under apartheid and forced together, really, under the current administration. Why? Because we're different to a large extent, culturally. And that's why, for as much as we have these differences, and we need to respect those differences, how you bring us together is making sure that the values, we advocate and we talk about the values continuously. Yera Mensa, this is our moment. This is where we draw the line and we say here and no further with the terrible ideas. From here on, we rally together and we say forward with the good ideas. Forward with the values of faith, flag, family, and freedom. Forward with the ideas that are liberty-leaning, that actually create a society where we can finally say, yeah, you know, South Africa is a prosperous country. We are a society defined by people who are living a middle-class life, prosperous property earning. As I like to say, I used to say this quite a lot as a kid, that we need to become a society where in every household, there's 2 chickens in the pot and a car in every garage. Woohoo! Yo, you guys have me on a live wire tonight. Live wire. All right, guys. Let me get back to the show. Oh wow, look at that. I'm running over time here, but all right, I'm running out of time. Tonight's show, very interesting, jam-packed. I have 2 guests who are probably waiting and wondering, yo, man, Big Daddy Liberty's talking so much. Let us get onto the show. I'm going to have Dumo Denga on the show a little bit later. Dumo Denga, of course, is the host of the Manpatria Podcast. Please make sure you check that out. And, of course, I do have a firm favorite of mine on the show, Mr. Mpiyakhe Dhlamini from the Free Market Foundation. And we're going to be unpacking this issue that I've put in the headline, for example, to say, why is there an assault on, why is there employment in this country? Why is there an assault on entrepreneurs in this country? The very things that we actually need if we're going to build that free, prosperous, property-earning and non-racial society, and how the ANC is at the root of that. As I said, I did spend this week talking to various people on the ground, and really, it was prompted by, yikes, I can see a bit of buffering on my line. Sorry, guys, I can see the buffering. It's going to be a very terrible evening if this is what it's going to be. Man, oh man, oh man. Again, I must apologize, guys. I really can see the buffering and all the issues. It's one of those evenings, which is terrible because this is like the one show which, oh man. Okay, we do not give up. We do not give up. We'll forge ahead. Again, guys, my apologies about that. Yes, Manpatria on the comments saying, the commies are ruining the flow of the show. Yes, they are. They saw my energy and they're like, shut him down tonight. He's too lively. Guys, give me a second. A little bit of troubleshooting, and then I will, as I said, I'm going to flight it's going to be about a 12-minute segment that I shot this week, where I spoke to stakeholders who are at the helm of street traders in this country. A Miss Rumbi, oopsie daisy, forgot her surname. Miss Rumbidzai Kangara. This is a fantastic lady who basically heads up a whole bunch of street traders organizations in the country. Wow, this is a terrible line tonight. Shoo, Mensa. No, as I can locate. All right. Anyway, guys, let me flight this. Maybe it'll give me a chance just to do a bit of troubleshooting in the background. As I said, some interviews with Ms. Rumbidzai Kangara, who heads up a street traders organization. And also I was in conversation with Mr. Piet Le Roux, who is the CEO of Sakeliga. This is the business league organization that fights for entrepreneurs, that fights for small, medium and large business in this country with liberty-leaning ideas. So I hope this will not be too choppy, but if it is, I will flight it on the channel on its own as a separate video so you can watch that in its entirety. So guys, these are the interviews I did this week. I will see you in about 12 minutes and we'll then pick up the conversation here in studio with Mr. Dumo Denga from the Manpatria Show and of course Mpiyakhe Dhlamini from the Free Market Foundation. So guys, I'll see you shortly after this insert. Hey guys, I'm in conversation with Rumbidzai Kangara, who wears many hats, but basically the hats that she wears are related to street traders and informal traders in particular. She represents multiple organizations in that regard. I'll let her tell us exactly what they are. But as I said, I'm in conversation with Rumbi. Rumbi, welcome to the Big Daddy Liberty Show. As I said, when we were chatting off air, I have a very deep problem with the government and its approach to street traders, especially during this lockdown period. But before we get into that, the many hats that you wear and the various organizations, can you just quickly, briefly let us know what these organizations are?
Okay, my name is Rumbidzai Kangara. I am a Secretary General of Hawkers and Informal Businesses at a provincial level, which is ACHIB. ACHIB stands for African Cooperative for Hawkers and Informal Businesses. It's a national organization which is governed by 9 provinces of South Africa. And I'm affiliated in the NAFCOC, which is the biggest business chamber of South Africa, which is National African Federated Chamber of Commerce and Industry, where I represent as a treasurer of Johannesburg NAFCOC. I am the treasurer of Johannesburg NAFCOC.
Tell me what conditions have been like for you guys as street traders. Has the government made it easy or more difficult for you guys under this current lockdown period?
I've got to attack the government itself because it is bringing us back to the situations where we were suffering before during the 1980s, whereby ACHIB as an organization had fought for during the apartheid era, with these challenges whereby street traders were not allowed in the streets. But during this corona, the lockdown, we can see the situation is even worsening through these obligations that are coming with the government itself, with these regulations that are changing now and there. And especially the JMPD is the one that I'm mostly worried about, and I may say concerned, because they are confiscating the traders' stock, saying that they are not allowed to trade because they want some permits, they want some licenses, and these licenses and permits, it has not yet been concluded or is still in the process, and it has not been agreed upon, whereby the government itself, it was coming with a policy draft which does not suit the informal trading. The policy draft does suit the formal business trading. And when we were called as a stakeholders, because I am a stakeholder of the government and I sit in these meetings, we all disagreed that this is not required because it's not suitable for the informal sector, it is suitable for formal sector. And we have decided that the draft which they came with as government, it should be it should be discussed as a trading policy, a space trading policy draft, not a trading, not a informal trading policy, but a trading space draft. This is what ourselves had agreed. Instead of grooming the small businesses, they are in fact themselves trying to oppress to the West. And this is the majority of the country, of the people in the economic development itself.
Yeah.
The small businesses must be given a full room to trade. They must make means for them to bring bread on the table to their lives, for their families. Because
let me stop you there for a moment, Rumbi, because I need to ask you very specific questions. Yes. Talk to me about your own business. Okay. How easy or how difficult has it been for you to trade under the lockdown period? Has government made it easier for you or more difficult? Specifically under lockdown.
The government itself had made it more difficult. In the first place, they were saying they would like to issue the permits.
Yeah.
The permits which they could not manage. And later after, when we were fought so hard, this is when the traders were allowed to come into the streets to trade. And it is a few of them. There are some other premises whereby these traders are not yet back into there because of all those obligations, which is very unfair to the small business people that ourselves represent.
Absolutely.
Is very, very unfair.
Ma'am, maybe as a final question, because we're going to have this conversation about the permits, for example, with hopefully with Piet Le Roux from Sakeliga, because they went to court to fight this issue. But talk to me about, again, maybe to be a bit personal on your business, as you're now back trading under level 3 of the lockdown. Have you recovered financially? What's the reality for your business now?
I have not yet recovered at present. As the situation itself, there is economic crisis, people they do not. Personally, it's just one of the business that I have, but the main business I run, it has not yet completely opened because the owners of the premises are not yet back to work. Number 2, the JMPD itself is a double impact. They are requesting for the licenses that has not yet been approved, and there are no offices that are issuing those licenses.
Wow.
Yet they are saying if the traders come back to trade, let's say if the owners of the premises begin to operate in 10 or 20 minutes or even an hour, they do not want these traders to come back. They said they will confiscate their stock because they do not want them to come and trade back into the street, which is a serious challenge that we have to fight for.
So government is making life difficult for you guys?
It is making life more difficult.
Yeah.
I may say it's even more difficult than Corona itself.
Wow.
The government is so destructive in businesses more than Corona itself. This is what I'm saying.
I think you made mention of it. It's the idea that we're preventing people from putting bread on the table. That's the reality of it. Rumbi, thank you so much for your time. And again, you heard it from Rumbi, like directly from her mouth. Not only as a representative of these various organizations that have street traders underneath them, but also as a businesswoman herself to say, why is government making life so difficult? Give me the freedom to trade is, I think, the underlying message. So we're going to have that conversation with other voices and we'll hear what they have to say about this issue. I then went to our friends over at Sakeliga, where I had a chat with Piet Le Roux, who's the CEO of the organization, about their fight against the government's attempt to control and stifle businesses with permits. This is what he had to say. Can you just quickly talk to me about what Sakeliga is, really? What do you do on a day-to-day basis?
Sakeliga simply translates into English as Business League. So we're an organization of business people, companies and individuals. And our mission is to create prosperity for our members, for all the communities around them, and for all communities with which they do business. So we're a non-profit organization, but that's what we do. And of course, in the extension of that, it means we stand up for free market system, for property rights, and for constitutionalism in its deepest sense.
Exactly why I think anybody who's watching probably can see why Sakeliga are friends of the show. But Pete, this particular segment, we've just finished sharing the story of a young trader, street trader, who went to social media to basically berate the state for a heavy-handed approach. He has a permit. he's done everything right, so to speak, in terms of what the state wanted. But then JMPD came, confiscated his stuff, and basically, even when he showed his permit, they said, stuff you, come and pick it up from impounding. And of course, there was that hint of give us a bit of a bribe and you'll get your stuff back. We just, again, spoke to Rumbi, who represents many street trader organizations, and she raised a similar issue, that the state is one of the biggest impediments to small businesses like hers in this country. Talk to me about your experience with small businesses around their view of the state and the regulatory burden they've had to run.
Look, it was terrible. This whole lockdown has been an economic disaster and an unnecessary one. The longer this continues, we just see the expectations of the health impact coming down and down and down. Initially, we were treated to predictions of 400,000 people are going to die, and now it's maybe 10, maybe 20, the worst predictions, 1,000. So all in all, it's just... all in all, medically, it's becoming insignificant in the larger scheme of things. Yet, government took this opportunity to introduce, in its ideological extension, a range of measures that was very harmful to businesses. Now, small businesses in particular, people like Rumbi and the people you just spoke of, but small businesses, even when they're larger with a couple of employees, are typically the organizations with the least ability to compensate for these regulatory burdens heaped upon them by government. And Sakeliga specifically took to case government, to task government on its attempt to introduce business licensing in South Africa. Now, there are some businesses, when you provide food or liquor and so on, then there's a special licensing regime. But in general in South Africa, you can still do business without permission from the state. But here government came and they required everybody in the country to have a permission from government before doing business. And that's unacceptable, and it's particularly harmful to businesses like Rumbi's, most of our members, who often are not even incorporated with the CIPC.
And again, I must raise this particular issue because I think it's at the core of the difficulty experienced by small businesses. In fact, if I can quote Rumbi directly, she said the biggest threat we faced as business wasn't COVID-19, but the actual state itself and the lockdown. Talk to me about the dangers of giving politicians the power to decide winners and losers in society, such as business licensing. Why is that such a dangerous thing?
Look, more than 2,000 pages of, about 2,000 pages of regulations so far have been published. Now, not a lawyer, we study these things. We don't have no idea how to possibly comply with all of the regulations. And now there came this power and this entitlement seems to be with government to think that they themselves are allowed to introduce these regulations. And when you have this, and especially when you have that coupled with this sort of sectoral approach, this master plan approach by Minister Patel and by even President Ramaphosa, then you have a situation where politicians decide which sectors of the economy should operate and how they should operate. And that's not within their capability, it's not within their rights. And so if there is a role for government in this, it would have been to introduce general rules of what is not allowed to do and say that poses a particular risk, and for now that kind of behavior is not allowed. But then now instead they came and they said this kind of product is not allowed, this kind of business, this kind of sector is not allowed. And they effectively cut business at its knees in terms of its ability to innovate around risk, which is what business do.
That's right. Maybe as a final question, really, and you made mention of it, you guys took the state on in court, especially its attempt to introduce this permitting regime. What were the outcomes of that court case, and why is it significant for small businesses, in fact, any business?
There were two major attempts to introduce business licensing. The two direct attempts. The first was by Minister Ibrahim Patel of Trade and Industry, who introduced CIPC certificates. And he now denies that it was compulsory, but he was very explicit initially that it's compulsory, and he later watered down his statements, but he left that whole impression to be there, and police questioned people, and the CIPC certificates said you have to have this, and so on. That was the one. So you had to have permission from the CIPC to do business. And quickly, he was alerted to the illegality and he changed his tune a little bit, but he left that impression there. The second major attempt was by the Minister of Small Business Development. And she went and said that, and this is where people like Rumbi and others came in, she tried to use national government powers to force provinces and local governments to force everybody in the town to have permission from government before they could do business. Now, this was even, she listed a number of businesses there, like hardware stores, etc. completely made up definitions. Nowhere in law does it have a basis. But she tried to use the national government powers to force a business licensing regime all across the country. And it's in tune with what Minister Rob Davies did 5 years ago, or 7 years ago in 2013 to 15. He was then Trade and Industry Minister, and he tried to introduce a system, he tried to amend the Businesses Act. We tried to scrap the old one, which was a product of the Free Market Foundation back in the early 90s, and he tried to re-engineer that whole thing and make it compulsory for everybody in the country to have permission from government before they could do business.
It's crazy.
And this, by Minister Patel and by the Minister of Small Business Development, was an extension of that ideological program, I'm convinced.
Piet, as I ended off, I'm sure there are guys watching now, maybe even small business owners who are thinking, I've got to get on board with Sakeliga. You guys are fighting the good fight, especially for the freedom to trade in this country. How do people join you guys? And I will have the information on the screen, but essentially, how do they get in touch with you guys?
We'd be very happy for people to follow us on social media, Sakeliga, or you could just check out the website. You can subscribe to our newsletters for free and you'll be up to date with whatever we do. And if you want to make a regular contribution, we'd appreciate that as well.
Perfect, absolutely. Guys, that's Piet Le Roux from Sakeliga. Again, you heard it from the horse's mouth. We're going to go back to studio and have a conversation about this one. Excuse me. I think I'm back, as I said, and I really hope you enjoyed that conversation, because again, it's from people who are on the ground, people who work in the sector, people who literally especially in Rumbi's case, here's an entrepreneur who built multiple businesses, hires people. She's able to say at the end of every business day that I've done what is required to make sure that the people who I employ can go home and put bread on the table. And it is those people who this ANC government is literally targeting. It is those people who this ANC government is looking to destroy as it tries to build, this socialist dystopia where people become dependent on the state. And I've been watching some of these comments. It's sad that and often it's people hiding behind pseudonym accounts. What does it matter that this woman is from another country? She's a South African now. She's fully invested in the state of affairs here. She's growing the South African economy. She's growing this country. Guys, there's nothing worse than this xenophobic sentiment that I see sort of pervading into our politics and creeping into our politics. But no, I'm not there tonight. Where I am is to have this conversation around the importance of us defending entrepreneurs and defending the doers in our society, the people who actually create the employment, and stop this weird praise and worship that we have for politicians who are destructive and who are consumers in the economy. Shout out to you, Sebastian Moretti. Thank you so much for that support. I'm just going to try and establish the fellas and get them onto the line. This, of course, will be Mr. Dumo Denga and Mpiyakhe Dhlamini. Just bear with me, people, as I get them on the line. Whilst I'm doing that, what did you guys think of the interview? Did you enjoy that? I think this will be the sort of flavor of the show going forward, as I head out during the week to bring you inserts and the like, and then bringing them to you on the show. I'm keeping an eye on the comments. Let me just, as I said, give these fellas a call. Let's see here. All right, let's see if I will not be failed by technology. And again, I must apologize, guys, for the choppy line. It is, the gremlins have my show firmly in their grasp today. All right, I see I do have the fellas online. I've kind of mixed up their names, so let me just quickly fix that, and then I'll get them onto screen. But as I said, I am sorry, fellas. They are on standby on another window. I'm just quickly fixing the information on here. Just quickly do that. Ooh, yikes. No, don't do that. There we go. That looks about right. Sorry, guys. New technology. I am still trying to get used to this. There we go. I have with me in studio, of course, sorry, I'm so used to saying with me in studio. I have with me on the show two gentlemen who are regular contributors on the Big Daddy Liberty Show, on the other show that I have called Blacks Only, which is a purposeful, it's a purposefully cheeky name. I'm making fun of society's obsession with race by calling the show Blacks Only. What I'm going to do is, whilst I just transition to that window, it should be on screen right now. Back up a little bit. Everybody's a little too, it'll appear on screen now. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But let me welcome to the show Mr. Dumo Denga, the host of the Manpatria Show. This is a podcast which I highly recommend that you subscribe to and listen to. And of course, Mr. Mpiyakhe Dhlamini, who is from the Free Market Foundation. Fellas, welcome to the show. And I'm sure you would have had a glance at that little insert, that segment that I played. Again, underscoring the difficulties that those of us in society who are creators of things, the entrepreneur, those of us who are productive individuals, people in employment, are literally under assault by a political elite in this country who are deeply immersed in the ideology of dependency, basically, which is what socialism and communism basically are. It's this idea of creating a ruling elite that has people dependent on it through the conduit of the state. Dumo, I'm going to begin with you because, I'm going to do left to right here. Excuse the pun. Not that you're on the left, but anyway. Dumo, I'm going to begin with you. I mean, you listen to Rumbi, a lady who's at the helm of literally thousands of street traders in this country, and she made it quite clear. The biggest threat we've faced in this country hasn't been COVID-19, it's been this government, not only in policy, but also with its asinine decision for a lockdown. Your thoughts?
Yeah, Rumbi hit the nail on the head. I really appreciated what she said. She was very passionate in her response. And yeah, the fact is that the government is very destructive in its policies. They again, it's like what Thomas Sowell said. Whatever policy the government makes, they'll never pay the price for being wrong. The people that are actually paying the price are actually the traders themselves, the informal traders and the formal traders. And even Piet from Sakeliga was even saying that if you look at the regulations and how they try to ram them and how they try to abuse power to put these regulations in place, it's quite clear that these guys have no clue what they're actually doing to the overall economy. And one more thing, even I think Lindiwe Zulu was saying that she was shocked that this lockdown has actually brought so much poverty. And now if someone says that, it's quite clear she hasn't done her homework on anything, really, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Guys, just as a quick warning, there are a bit of technical glitches here. For whatever reason, the program has switched you. So now you have the incorrect name text under each of you. I'll try and fix that in the duration of the show. But Mpiyakhe, again, if I can just maybe get your views on this. Urumbi basically saying it, in no uncertain terms, that it was the lockdown that created the misery and not COVID-19, as the politicians are trying to have us believe was the case here. Your initial thoughts to that view?
No, she's absolutely correct. I mean, there's nothing I can add to that. She's absolutely correct. It's the decision to lock down. And I mean, it's so funny seeing in the media all these articles saying the COVID-19 caused the COVID-19 caused economic crash or the financial crisis brought on by COVID-19. Like, what are they talking about? I mean, it's not COVID-19. Like, this was caused by the government shutting down the economy. So she's absolutely correct. And another thing that she mentioned was her organization's championing of a regulated trading spaces policy instead of regulating the activity itself, instead of putting regulations on the activity itself, which is very important and something which ACHIP has been fighting for a long time. And so I think this would remove some of the arbitrariness in regulations. And just a point on the xenophobic point, Sihle, you might know that the former mayor Herman Mashaba tried to introduce tried to regulate informal trading in Johannesburg. And one of the things that he was trying to introduce was the requirement for South African citizenship. And so luckily that's that is still in the process of being reviewed and so on, but it's not yet become official policy. But these are some of the things that make up the legacy of the former mayor in Johannesburg. And so this has been a big problem. Some of these policies have been a big problem for the organization, because what Piet Le Roux mentioned about the Business Act is important, because the Business Act gives the right to municipalities to regulate all of these things related to the informal trading. And so if government tries to subvert that by imposing national regulation, then it will be doing an illegal act, violating the law in effect.
Absolutely. And guys, I must bring this up because it's becoming a trend, at least in the chattering classes. But it has the danger of also wafting down into the rest of society, this idea of put South Africans first. Which at the face value, it's great political rhetoric, isn't it? Because it makes you think that somehow, politicians are going to write policies that, as quote, put South Africans first. But really, the danger behind it is giving politicians the power to make up rules often in the name, because this is the thing about politics that I find to be quite disgusting. Often a politician will advance an idea that at face value you think is pro-individual, pro-families, but really is actually pro-politician. And this whole put South Africans first thing would essentially, and I want you guys to talk to it, would essentially give politicians the power to make up arbitrary rules in the name of advancing a cause for South Africans. But how do you decide that? Like, for example, the guy who made the comment on here, I don't see him now. I think he's sort of ducked and tailed. But how do you determine that someone is South African, for instance? Like, how do you even know that? Like, on what policy level is that even a justified thing to do, when you might very well find that in terms of the value someone creates as an entrepreneur, she's hiring South Africans, she's making sure that there's food on their tables. Mpiyakhe.
Yes, exactly. I mean, this is immigrants, African immigrants in particular in South Africa. They bring about a tremendous amount of dynamism to the South African economy. They've really opened up the township retail markets, which had been stagnant for a long time, and they opened it up, and then this led to the likes of ShopRite, Pick n Pay, and Boxer following them. And so this is we need that kind of entrepreneurship in South Africa, and we should be encouraging it. We should be begging these people to come. We should be making it as easy as possible, because they not only do that, they also provide jobs to South Africans and also an income as well. So this is it's a no-brainer. Like we need entrepreneurial individuals. Like if individuals commit crime, that's a separate point. If someone commits a crime, yes, you can deport them, and that's allowable in the current law. But if someone is living peacefully, creating jobs, making money in a legal way in the country, why not? Like, what's the problem with that?
Absolutely.
Even if they came here illegally initially, but if someone is not committing a crime here, there is no problem with that in my view. And we should allow the people who are responsible for informal trade in Johannesburg, and other cities, to continue doing what they do best, which is providing South Africans with cheap goods and services.
Absolutely. And again, Dumo, Mpiyakhe makes the point. We're not skimping on the idea of the rule of law and order. I mean, if someone breaks the law, and if they're a foreign national, absolutely, put them through the criminal justice system, and if the law allows, deport them. Absolutely, I have no issue with that. But Dumo, I want to bring the central issue, I think, with you, and we'll have the conversation on this. It is not entrepreneurs. It is not foreign nationals. It is not those of us who are in employment who are the problem in this country. It is the politicians and their decision making. It is the politicians and their particular ideology, in this case, the ANC's National Democratic Revolution, a socialist doctrine, which is the greatest impediment to economic progress in this country. It is the greatest boot on the neck, if you will, of people who are doers, people who are creators. Your thoughts on that? Like, what? Rephrase the question. Your thoughts on essentially the ideology behind the ANC that is the stifler of economic progress in South Africa?
Well, the ideology has been made quite clear in recent developments. You've heard that they want to use pension funds to build this new economy. You even heard Ramaphosa even going around saying that he wants to have a new start and that the economy must be state-led. So clearly, the ideology is clear right there, but I think a lot of people have not seen it because I don't think they're really awake to it. The reality is very simple. I mean, when the state tries to control the means of production, you are going to have a lot of failures in the economy. People are going to be discouraged to open businesses. People are going to go to other places or other countries rather to open businesses, and therefore those skills will leave the country, and therefore you're left with a barren country that's going to have a lot of shortages over time. So yeah, definitely so. The ideology of the ANC is obviously the NDR, which has actually been inspired by the Soviet Union, which was a socialist state and no longer exists today. But what is really weird is that the ANC is still adamant on implementing these policies that have failed in each and every country that has been implemented in, and also killed 90 million people worldwide. Oh, that's at least 90 million people. So I don't know why they're still obsessed with that idea.
I mean, it beggars belief. It beggars belief that this is literally the ANC's route here, the doubling down on the idea that politicians somehow have some greater insight in how we organize an economy. And I want you to chime in here because you guys at the Free Market Foundation are at the forefront largely in pushing back against this idea. These broadly, and I must say it, ideas that are on the left that dominate our politics in this country. Why is it a problem, Mpiyakhe, of assuming or even thinking that a politician knows best, or that somehow a politician in a centralized government can control the economy? How are the lefties wrong in this one?
I'm not going to comment on the particular political parties, but I just on the point about centralized control of the economy. I think that has been proven to be a failure from, like, it has never worked anywhere.
Yeah.
It's impossible because the genius of the capitalist or the free market economy is that it allows individual brilliance to play out and for people to come up with solutions that no one had ever thought of before, and that's individual brilliance to express itself. For people to come up, like, just to give you something that is a personal interest of mine, the space industry in the USA. It used to be dominated by government through NASA, and then it was NASA had contractors that it worked with, that built the components of the vehicle that NASA required for each particular mission. And then eventually these companies that were NASA's contractors became the only available, launch providers. Like they were just a monopoly, like for all government contracts to launch payloads into space. And so eventually the market was disrupted through the opening up of the market through deregulation, a Space Commercialization Act, if I'm not mistaken. So I think it was passed under George W. Bush. And so this has opened up the market, and this is why you can have the likes of SpaceX, Electron, Blue Origin, even Virgin, and so on coming into the market. And so this is because, like, centralized control, what's actually happened under the days of centralized control under NASA's contractors, they actually went backwards from being able to go to the moon to only being able to go to low Earth orbit, until they lost that capability when they lost the space shuttle. So this might be maybe a more abstract example of the point, but I think it serves the purpose to show that, like you need every economy, like no matter how advanced you are, like the Americans, like NASA was run by the best scientists in America. No matter how advanced you are, no matter how well trained you are, it is simply impossible to direct market forces, even if it's just one industry, the space industry, and you deploy your best intellectual capability towards that end. It's simply impossible. You cannot run an economy through centralized means. You need to open it up. Absolutely. And this is exactly what the informal sector does. Earlier on, you mentioned the unemployment rate that is now risen to 30.1%, 39.7% if you looked at the expanded definition. And so one of the other things that is buried in those numbers is that 2.9 million people are employed in the informal sector in South Africa. And so this is, as of quarter one, 2.9 million people are employed. So the full impacts of the lockdown are going to be felt in quarter two.
Absolutely.
So of those 2.9 million people in the informal sector, how many will still be employed in the informal sector? We will see, time will tell. But this just shows like the devastation. I mean, the devastation of government policy. If things are not well considered, this is why you need the private sector, like that chaos of many individuals making separate decisions, making their own risk assessments, as Piet Le Roux mentioned, allowing entrepreneurs to adjust for risk.
Absolutely. No, I agree. Mpiyakhe, I'm just going to ask you just to shift a little bit to your left, I think, because you're a little bit out of frame. You are perfect there. Perfect. All right, guys, I'm going to open it up to the question section. I see it's going berserk on a separate issue, I think, of flags on here. So I'm going to try my level best to sort of sift to questions. And that means you, dear viewer. If you have a question for my panel guests here on the show, please pop it into the question section. And I'll put it to my guests. Remember, I'm joined I keep saying in studio, I'm joined on the show by Mpiyakhe Dhlamini from the Free Market Foundation and Dumo Denga, the host of the Manpatria Show. Guys, I'm going to try and wrap up the show at 9:30, so please get your questions in to the show. Fellas, as I sort of keep an eye on the question section, on the comment section to find any questions, Dumo, there's a big issue, I think, and Mpiyakhe raises it now, that this is a trend. And I mentioned it at the beginning of the show, that the unemployment, the assault on entrepreneurs, it's not a Johnny-come-lately thing. The ANC, it's very much lockstep with the ANC's policy of the National Democratic Revolution. The idea that a dependent society, a poorer society, is much easier to manipulate politically, by people who seek that sort of power. Do you want to maybe quickly chime in on that as I sort of go for questions on here?
Okay, I'll definitely like to do that. So the whole thing about guys with the NDR is that, we have to make people dependent on the state. Otherwise, if they're not dependent on the state, they'll be independent and they don't need the state. So the only way you can do it is you can force it. So one way to do that is to probably introduce some sort of welfare in place and also make it difficult for people to get a job at the same time. And as you can see right now, the government is actually doing that very well. We have about 17 million people on welfare. Out of those 17 million, about 12.4 million of them are actually child grants. So definitely, and that number's going up every year as well. So, and again, that costs a lot of money. And really, if the ANC wanted to keep this welfare program going, they just should at least have a free market economy and they can tax it lightly and get enough tax revenue to cover those costs. But in fact, they're actually taking out debt. And if you look at Tito Mbowene's speech today, he mentioned that they're in a lot of trouble with regards to debt, but he never gave some viable solutions on how to get out of it. In fact, he said that he's going to, bail out the land bank with 3 billion rands. So the reality is very simple. The policies of the ANC in making people more dependent and trying to implement a socialist state is a very expensive and destructive idea. As mentioned earlier, it has never worked before, and I don't think it will work anytime in the future.
Absolutely. And let me get into the questions here, because I think you also raised an important point about the national debt. It's at scary levels when at the beginning of the year, they projected it should be at somewhere around 61%, I think, they said of GDP. And now we're looking at 80% plus of GDP. And again, that has nothing to do with COVID-19 and everything to do with the terrible decision to embark on a lockdown. Again, ideas and policies have consequences. Bad ideas have consequences, I keep saying on the show. There's some questions here, because we're speaking about when one talks about bad ideas, the ANC's love affair with communist ideology. The question from Still Alpha is, what are our thoughts on the ANC's cozy relationship, for example, with the Chinese Communist Party? Mpiyakhe?
I would say that the government has a right to, obviously, I think it's a good policy to trade with everyone, to maintain friendly relations with everyone. And I think it's good that the government officially has that policy. That is our official foreign policy, to basically trade with everyone and to engage with everyone, to keep every line of communication open, to have embassies with every country, to always be neutral, to adopt a neutral stance, to be a peacemaker instead of a participant in conflicts and so on. And this includes our participation as peacemakers. So that's a good thing. But when you see one party, when the government choosing one country, others, that becomes a problem. If government expresses a preference in China over the USA, for example, that is a problem, because, as we know, like, the USA shares our values that are encoded in our constitution. So if we are going to be, those are natural allies to us, we need to keep the natural allies closest to us. I mean, I think there's plenty of research that has shown that in terms of strife and then difficulties, democracies tend to help each other. Democracies tend to trade among each other peacefully and so on. And so those with the values that are closest to us, those are our closest friends. But of course, we should still maintain friendly relations with China and trade with China, and not be an aggressor to China.
Yeah.
But also, I wanted to comment on Dumo's point on the fiscal situation as well.
Yeah, sure.
Because I think it's like it's like the big story today, and we haven't really mentioned it. I mean, it's quite scary. Like, Sita, you were mentioning that at the beginning of this year, the estimate was 65.6% in the February budget. Last year's budget, the estimate for the debt to GDP for this year was 57%, and because of ESCOM, it had to be raised to 65.6%. And now, because of the lockdown, it's been raised to 81.8%. And now, just look at those numbers. In the space of a year, we've gone from 57% to 81.8%. That is a crazy amount of government spending and debt accumulation. That is unsustainable. Like, everyone, that's heading for disaster. I mean, people don't understand how rapidly these numbers are changing. I mean, these are not even final numbers. If you read today's budget review, Treasury has all the bars grayed out, because they say these are uncertain estimates, so they'll have better numbers in October. So we don't even show. It could be worse. So as bad as these numbers are, it could be worse, and it likely will be worse, because Treasury has a history of being over-optimistic.
I mean, guys, let's take a moment and maybe unpack this, because Utito Mboweni tried to gloss over this a little bit in a speech. And I was actually, as he was doing it, I was like, don't do that, because this is literally the story of the day, so to speak. Imagine if a household, a father in a household or a mother in a household ran the household like our government runs the national finances, where they just spend recklessly and there's no regard paid to the income that comes in, and the deficit keeps growing. Dumo, surely you'd reach a point of being bankrupt very soon.
Yeah. Exactly. I think in a normal household, I mean, at some point, people are going to be like, whoa, we can't be taking out so much credit, because the guys that we took out credit from initially are going to be asking for money, and how are we going to pay that off with more debt? It just becomes a circle, a vicious circle that's unsustainable, and eventually, they're gonna, get your property and so forth. So definitely, so I think that the government needs to do that, and as I said on Twitter today, what they need to do is they need to say, okay, listen, if they want more money, they need to allow for the free market to occur, and the only way they can do that is by going to the guys within the coalitions and so forth and say, listen, guys, you're gonna have to park this NDR for a while. And, maybe they can, speak to them and manage expectations in some way. But at the end of the day, they need to get more tax revenue, and the only way you can do that is for more, businesses to operate, and also reduce the tax rates as well. Because I think we're actually beyond the what's this thing? The Laffer curve.
Yes.
What is it beyond the
midpoint?
That name.
The turning point.
The turning point. There's another word I was looking at, but I think the turning point is fine. Yeah, the turning point of the Laffer curve, and we are beyond that. So we need to reduce the tax rate and have a better economy, allow for more business to operate, and I think we can take that money and use it to pay off the debt, just like Mpiyakhe did when he was in power. But then the Jay-Z guys, and the communists came and ruined everything.
And them commies came in strong. Just for the sake of the audience, the Laffer curve refers to basically the idea that a government can only tax a population to a certain point until beyond that point, is diminishing returns. Like you don't actually get more income from that. Guys, I'm going to go to another question here from NT, who's back. NT, I saw your comments, homie. We need to have words on that. Anyway, NT basically asked the question, what do my guests think about the lack of protection for the informal sector? And maybe I'll add to that. I'll say, should there be quote-unquote protection for the informal? Like, should we expect politicians to protect any sector? Is that a good idea, Mpiyakhe?
So we just need clear rules for the operation of the sector that are not open to abuse by officials at the lower levels, like Metro Corps and so on. So we just need clear rules that guarantee the rights of informal traders. That is all we need. So, like one of the things that Sihle you saw when you did your taxi series in Cape Town was that Cape Town has actually demarcates space for informal traders. They mark out space for them on the sidewalk.
That's right.
And so these people are able to trade in their own designated space, and they have all rights guaranteed as long as they stay within that space. And so this is the model that other cities or in other municipalities need to be thinking about, which removes like some of the arbitrariness, a lot of arbitrariness. And so this is what we were talking about practically when Rumbi refers to regulated trading spaces as opposed to regulating the practice of informal trading itself. And so this is what needs to come, and we just need to remove the abuse there, which is caused by arbitrariness. And once you've done that, you've basically solved the problem, because these people don't need any external support by government. They are proving that they can support themselves. In addition to removing some of those things that hamper street traders, there are a whole lot of other informal traders which are not street traders, and which are hampered by other problems which relate to other regulations that government imposes, which also need to be removed in those cases. Because the only way to make sure that people are allowed to do business is to get out of their way, is to actually allow them to do business. I mean, you can't say that you want business entrepreneurs and then at the same time tell people that they can't do certain kinds of businesses in certain kinds of way. That is insane. You can't say that you want black-owned banks, but then you don't allow people who have a capital of less than 10 million rands to start a bank. That's stupid. Like, why would you do that? So I think government needs to consider some of those things.
Absolutely. Dumo, do you want to chime in? And maybe as you do, there's another question here from Kerry van Skalkwyk. Big fan of the show. Hi, Kerry, I see you. What do your guests think about zero-sum budgeting? What do you make of that, Dumo?
It sounds decent. I mean, zero-sum budgeting is the idea, if I'm not mistaken, is that you spend every cent that you earn. Now, if you look at the...
she's referring to zero-based budgeting, I think.
Zero-based? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah,
Please explain that.
Do you want to quickly explain that?
Yeah, it's where you start off basically from a zero base every year. So right now, how budgeting works is the budget for last year is taken as the baseline. So what you can do is adjust the baseline from last year. So increase the baseline, like add more money to this, maybe remove money from there or sometime, but most of the time add money to the current baseline, and the budget is just structured to grow and grow over time. Zero-based budgeting theoretically helps with that because you start from a zero base. So every expenditure is taken as if it's new. So it has to be justified afresh. So the person requesting the expenditure has to give detailed reasons in terms of government priorities why that expenditure is necessary. And so theoretically it should help stem the abuse. But in an article of mine that has been published on the Free Market Foundation website, I point out that there is a flaw in this approach because it really depends on the methodology that is adopted within government as to how projects are approved in this zero-based budgeting framework. Much better is a cash budgeting approach, which was adopted by Tenda IPT in the government of unity in Zimbabwe when he was finance minister, which basically entails budgeting within the cash you expect to raise in revenue. So you would do projections and say, okay, I expect to raise this much in taxes, so I'm only going to spend within this much. And then when your expectations drop, as in COVID-19 in South Africa, where now Treasury now expects to collect 300 billion rands less, so from 1.4 trillion to 1.1 trillion. So in that kind of situation, then you would adjust your spending downwards. You say, I need to cut 300 billion rands from my budget immediately.
All right. Yeah, that sounds like a novel approach. Guys, I'm just keeping an eye on my time, and I need to actually wrap up. So maybe I'll give it the last 5 minutes, because there was a question there. Maybe as a final question then, perhaps. And they're linked, both from a guy named Gary and Sebastian. The idea of, then how do we beat the commies is the question from Gary. And Sebastian goes into a bit more by saying, how do we get these ideas that we've been talking about, for example, here on the show, into communities? And I have my views on this, and I have my particular mission that I'll be going on. But what are your guys' thoughts on this? Dumo, let me begin with you.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think just from my point of view, I think platforms like YouTube and Facebook and so forth, putting out your views out there is one way of doing it. You'll reach a certain percentage of people, but I think really if you want to get into the heart of the people, I think we're going to have to meet people face to face, and there are many innovative ways of doing that. So, and I just think we can have a South African taste as well. There's a lot of, in America, they do a lot of that, and I think we can adopt it to our circumstances as well.
Mpiyakhe, your thoughts? How do we get these ideas into communities?
I agree with you both. I think we need to do a lot more of the face-to-face, like what you were talking about before the start of the show, Sitle, about engaging more, going to local radio stations, and also just engaging with local newspapers as well. All of those things are important. Like find out what local issues are important. I think you sort of need to build a network across all the communities, starting with the major communities, the metros, and then expand from there. And just sort of build a network of people working locally in the communities. Now, this will take a lot of hard work, a lot of time, but I think it's possible. I mean, we could start. I mean, I'm based where I am. Start here, and then you guys are based where you are, and then as you travel across the country, maybe you could come visit this site. Who knows? So, just a lot of things that you could do.
No, absolutely. And guys, I must say this because I think both of you are instrumental in being part of my plan, for example. Mpiyakhe, you're the kind of person who I've even said before that, hey man, there may be many instances where if I'm in a particular community, I will be with Mpiyakhe, and other voices, other liberty-minded individuals who we can come into communities and do that groundwork, because you cannot defeat the ideas of your ideological opponents, if I can call it that, or those who are pushing bad ideas into communities by not investing in talking to people, engaging people, growing a culture of people engaging these ideas. So absolutely, I think both of you guys will be very instrumental in that regard. I have to wrap up the show, guys. I'm a little bit over time, and I must say thank you to both of you. Maybe before I let you go, how do the people find you on social media? Mpiyakhe, how do we find you?
So my social media participation is almost ground to zero now, but occasionally I'll be on Twitter, which is at @Touring_91. And then my website as well is MpiyakheDhlamini.com.
Excellento. Dumo, how do we find you on your social media, and how do people listen to the Manpatria podcast?
Okay, if you want to listen to the Manpatria podcast, just go to manpatria.com/podcast. You'll find our podcast archive there, and everything is there. You can just listen, watch, do whatever you want there. And also, if you want to get me on social media, you can get me on Twitter at Dumo Denga. And also at the same time, you can also get the Manpatria Twitter as well at Manpatria_ZA.
Fantastic, guys. I must say thank you to the both of you. And yeah, with that being said, thank you, dear viewer, for being a part of the show. You guys are literally the lifeblood of the BDL show. I hope you enjoyed tonight's show. I did try some new stuff, which I think once I have a better internet connection, a more stable one, will make for greater television. You know, I'm always out and about interviewing people, talking to people, and I like to bring that on to the show, not only as live guests, but people who I may have interviewed in the week. So I hope you enjoyed that format. Leave a comment. Let me know if you liked it, because it will definitely form part of the show, especially, as I said, as I begin to take to the road. As of next week, basically, I begin what will be a week and a half long journey from Johannesburg, making my way to Cape Town, and I'll be passing all sorts of dorpies along the way, running various campaigns and flash type campaigns also. So look out for that. You might find me in your part of the world. I'll then be based in Cape Town for about 2 months as I shoot various mini documentaries in that part of the world, bringing you South African stories through the eyes of liberty. Again, thank you to my guests. And with that being said, remember you can support the Big Daddy Liberty Show by becoming a Patreon subscriber. As little as $1 a month, 17 Rand a month will do it, as I build a broad base of people who fund the show. So please consider becoming a supporter there, as I also grow the ways in which you can support the show financially. I know people have been complaining about Patreon. I do hear your comments. Guys, as a reminder, if you want to reach the show, my email address is bdl@bigdaddylibertyshow.com. Remember, it's bdl@bigdaddylibertyshow.com. And you can pop me a mail and maybe, hey, let me know in your part of the world whether you'd like me to pass by as I head down to Cape Town. So make sure you send those messages through. Guys, with that being said, thank you so much for watching. And remember, never trust a commie.